Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel, and today we'll be diving into the Java enums, explaining what it is and how you can use it and why you should use it. Okay, so without further ado, let's dive into it. Before we start, if you like my content, please subscribe to my channel or leave a comment below or give the like button to the video so we can increase the audience of the channel. Thank you. So let's get started. The first thing we're gonna explain is what is an enums. And enums are an object of Java which help you limit what kind of values you can attribute to some variable. Let's take an example. Imagine if you have a list of value that you can attribute to your variable. For example, imagine if you have set or list of colors, and only this list of colors can admit only like green, red, and yellow. And if you try to attribute other colors than any of these three, you need to be having an error. Instead of having in your code, each time you receive a value, you verify if it's one of these three values, you can use an enums. A set of an enums will allow you to limit the value that you can attribute to, for example, your variable. This can use for a color example. You can use it also, for example, let's say if you have two values like true, false, or yes, no, or like stop and move, or something like that. You can use it also, it's very common in a business. You can use it, for example, to attribute some state of some object or some demand or request. Let's say, for example, you have a request and the only state a request can have is accepted, rejected, in process. So if you try to put some state, you can limit the set of the value you can attribute to your object. So with that, we're gonna try to take a look into the code to see how you can implement all of this. Okay, so what we are going to build today is we're gonna build an API, just a get API. We already did a video to how we build an APIs with MongoDB. I will leave a link to the description. So in this example, we will build a simple controller with a get method that receive parameters, and we will try to implement an enums, and this parameter will refuse any value that is not included into the enum. So let's see how we can build that. First of all, we try to initiate Spring. We will be needing this dependency, Spring Web, and we will be needing also Lombok, and that's it. We'll be generating the project. And here I already did it just to not waste time. And here I have a simple Java Spring application. So without further ado, let's start with creating our controller. Let's call it Enum controller. Okay. So as we saw previously, so not wasting time. So we're gonna annotate it with REST controller here. And we are going to add the REST request mapping. Let's say it as default. Okay, and then inside it we are going to create the get mapping. The get mapping here. Okay, and then let's say, for example, we are returning a string get colors enum. Okay, and just for testing, we are going to return here a string. Let's call it. Okay, so this is working. Okay, just to test if our controller. Let's go back to our main function and try to execute this. So we see that the application execute well. Okay, let's go back to our application. Here in Spring, here we open a new one. Let's go to localhost and see this is working. So our endpoint is working just fine. Okay, now we will be trying to implement the enums. For that, we will be creating a new class, and then in IntelliJ we can specify this is an enum, and let's call it color, for example. Okay, here we have our enums, and what we will be doing is defining some color, for example, let's say red, green. The convention of naming enums are already in capital letters, okay? And let's say, for example, blue, okay? So here we have our enums, okay? So we go back to our enum controller, and into the get mapping, we will be telling the get that we will be waiting for slash a parameter here. Let's call it, for example, color, okay? Okay, color, okay? And then here, we will be saying that we are expecting a path path variable, I'm sorry, okay? And call it, for example, this type is enum, let's call it, for example, type of color, okay, which is the type of color, okay? And then here we will be saying that the color is 2 point and add it with, I'm sorry, colors, okay? So here, let's restart our application and try to call our application here. If we call it back with localhost, we say that this does not exist. Let's say, for example, we define it as red. And here you say that this color red. Let's try it with green. The color is green. Now imagine if I'm trying to use another color, for example, yellow. Here you get HTTP 400, which is a bad request, which this is not allowed. Imagine also if you are trying to, instead of using, for example, blue like this, you are using not blue, but for example, with not capital letters. This is working also. So, because it's case sensitive. Or for example, one capital letter, it's also working. So it will accept, it's not case sensitive, but it will accept only this value. So if you misspell, for example, blue with this one, it will tell you the best request. So this is a way of protecting your application. This is a way of protecting your application from value that are not desired. For the next example, we're gonna see how we can attribute and add more information to our enums. Here our enums, it's only a simple word like red, green, and blue. Imagine if you want, for example, to add more information. Let's say, for example, for red, you want to add, for example, a label to it. Let's say, for example, red color, which is like some sort of label. And for example, brightness, you can say, for example, is let's say red, it's a dark, just for the sake of the example, a dark value. And you can use, for example, you can give it like some ID. Let's call it like 12. Okay. For green, we can do the same by giving it, let's say, for example, green color. Okay. Let's give it soft, and let's give it an ID, which could be, for example, 22, just for the sake of the example. And for blue, you're gonna give it a label, which is like a blue color. Okay. And is it soft? Yes, you can give it like soft, for example, and give it some sort of an ID, which is like, I don't know, 44, for example, okay? For the sake of the example, let's put it as capital letter. So here you have some more added value. This is a color, so this is a simple example, but you can, in the future, can have like more information, for example, in your request or status or something like that. You want to add more information, okay? So now you want to create a constructor, but before that, you will need to create a public all the attribute for this one, which is like a private final string name, which correspond to the first example, I mean the first value here. Then public final, let's say for example the intensity, the brightness, which is a string. Let's call it bright. And finally, here, public final string, and let's call it an ID. Okay, so for that, we are going to need a constructor for these values here to be able to get all of them. One thing we have to do is here, the ID, it's an int. It's not here, it's not a string. So we have here our constructor, okay? And then what we will be needing, the getters and setters. Since we added Lombok for that, we are going to use the annotation getters, but also you can just come here and generate it automatically from here, generate getters, and you can get them. But to avoid any boilerplate code, we use Lombok for that. So here we have our getters. If we go back to our controller here, okay, so here we received our color. Imagine if we want, instead of receiving the color, we're gonna return the brightness. The brightness is, and here from the color, you can just call get bright, which according to which value, which color you'll be sending, he will access to this one, okay? So let's give it a try and go back to localhost. And here, for example, if we send the blue, here maybe it did not start yet, okay? Everything is started, okay? We can go back and try to execute this one. Yes, we have to call it on red, for example, and here you know the brightness is red. And you can access wherever characteristic that you want. For example, the label, for example, is, and instead of returning the brightness, you can call get. Here, for example, get name, which is also the label, and try to relaunch the application and come back here and go back to localhost, and here the label is red color. So this is a very simple application. This is simple use of it. But think of this when you are using Enum, for example, as a request, and you want to use, for example, let's say, for example, request, when it is accepted, one of the value of the Enum is accepted, you want to get the label, you want to get the ID, you want to get, for example, the next step, something like that. So you can add more information. I will be adding into the description more info, more resources when you can take a look. There is more to it, to the Enum. This is a very, very, very basic introduction. So that will be all for today. Thank you for watching, and I hope you learned something. So please don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you like my content, and leave a comment below. If you have any question, I will try my best to reply to you. Thank you, and see you in the next episode.